Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode we started adding throwables into our game, so we created these grenades, and in this episode we're going to continue working on our system. We're going to add some tacticals, and we're also going to make the system a bit more generic. The first thing we want to do is hide the UI when we don't have any kind of throwable, because right now we do see these empty slots, but we don't want to see them if we are not carrying anything. So inside the HUD manager, we're going to scroll to the bottom of the update method and we're going to add some code. So we simply check if we have 0 or less grenades, and if we do, then we simply set this gray slot to be the sprite of the lethal UI. And this gray slot is just a reference that I created. So if we go to the inspector of the HUD manager, we're going to see this gray slot over here, and all you need to do is add this UI mask. And this is a sprite that comes with Unity, so you should have it. You can just go over here and search for UI, and you're going to find this UI mask. Next, we also want to add some kind of sound to the explosion of the grenade. So inside the sound manager, we're going to have a new audio source and a new audio clip. So this will be the channel that is going to run all the different sounds for the throwables, and this is just a clip that is going to be specific for the grenade. Then inside the inspector, we're going to create a new audio source, and we're going to drag it into the throwables channel. We're going to disable the play on awake, and then we're also going to drag the grenade sound. So you can find a link in the description for a grenade explosion, and you simply drag it into this grenade sound clip. So inside the throwables script, we can find this grenade effect method, and over here we're going to add play sound. And this will play the grenade sound each time the grenade is going to explode. So now when we throw a grenade, we have this satisfying sound. The next thing we want to do is make our throwable system a bit more generic, because right now we are hard coding the amount of grenades, but this is not good practice, because maybe tomorrow you want to create another custom lethal throwable, for example a Molotov cocktail or something like that. Then you're not going to have a list with all the different kinds of lethals, because in our system you can only carry one type of lethal throwable, and right now we simply cannot add new lethals because it's simply not going to work. It will always just check the amount of grenades we have. So we are going to scroll down to the throwables region. So we have this throwables region over here with all the methods that are related to the throwables. So we have this pickup throwable method, and instead of running this pickup grenade method when we detect that we picked up a grenade, we are going to have another extra layer that is going to be specific for the lethals, because later we're also going to have tacticals and we want to separate all of these. So over here, instead this pickup grenade, let's just comment this out. We're going to have another method, and inside this method we're simply going to pass in grenade, because if it's a grenade we want to run this method with a grenade in mind. So let's generate this. And before we add the code for this method, we're going to add a few things over here. So instead counting the amount of grenades we have, we're going to be a bit more generic, and we're going to have a public int lethals count. So we're going to keep track of the amount of lethals we have instead of hard coding the grenades, because if we have grenades, we know that this is the only lethal that we have. If we're going to pick up another lethal throwable, it's going to replace the grenades. And this is just the way we're going to do it. Of course, in your game, you can do it in a different way. Now, I'm not going to delete this yet, because otherwise things will not work. So we're going to delete this only when we actually completed the conversion. Another thing that we want to do is keep track of the current lethal that we have. So if we picked up a grenade, then this will be the equipped lethal. Because as I told you, you can only have one type of lethal at any given moment. Another thing that we're going to do is open our Throwable script, and over here we're also going to add another enum that will be none. So in the beginning, the equipped lethal will be none, and only when we pick up a certain lethal, it's going to change to that lethal. So in the beginning, this will be none, and only when we pick up a grenade or something else, it's going to switch to be that throwable type. So over here in the start method, equipped lethal type will be throwable none. So in the beginning of the game, we're not going to have any kind of equipped lethal type. Now that we added these things, we can finally add some code to the pickup throwable as lethal. So first we check if the equip type is the same as the one that we're trying to pick up, or the equipped lethal type is none, then you can proceed over here. And then you can set the equipped lethal type to be the lethal. So if we had none, but then we picked up a grenade, then the equipped lethal type will become a grenade. And then we check if we have reached the limit of the lethals that we want to carry. Now, maybe in your game you don't want to have a limit, so you can set it to 100. You want the player to just keep picking up lethals. You don't want to set any kind of limitation. But if you do want to have some kind of limitation, you can just set it over here. And if we have less than 2, so if we have less than the limit, then we're going to add 1 lethal into our count. We're going to destroy the actual grenade, and we're going to update the throwables. But if we have more than the limit, then we won't be able to pick up a new lethal. And the reason we're destroying this over here instead of the interaction manager like we did in the previous episode, right? We destroy this over here because at this point, we still don't know if we can even pick it up. Only after we run this method and then we go over here, we are going to check if we have more than the limit and if we have another type, and only then we can know if we actually want to pick it up. So only then we're going to destroy this game object. And the reason this gives us an error is because before we needed to pass a parameter, but we don't need it anymore because we're simply going to get a reference to this lethal from the weapon manager. So we're going to delete this. And because this is not hard-coded anymore, we can take this out because we don't need to run this code only for the grenades. We still need to do it each time. And instead of grenades, we just say lethal count. This will become more generic. It will just update the lethal amount, and it will also update the equipped lethal type. And if this is not understood, we can just rename it to be update throwables UI. So this is all about the UI. So now let's continue with making the code more generic. So back to this method. Of course, right now we are not using this anymore, so we can delete this. And we can also delete the actual method, this pickup grenade, because now we have it over here. Next, we want to deal with the throwing of the lethal. So because we're not only using a grenade right now, we're not going to hard code it anymore, but we're going to have some kind of method that is going to give us the prefab. And over here, we don't need to pass in the type anymore because it happens inside, and instead of grenades we're going to use the lethals count. Now let's create this method. So inside this method we're simply going to check what is the equipped lethal type, and if it's a grenade it's going to return us the grenade prefab. And Right now we can add more cases, so if for example we have another lethal, then we can return its prefab. Beforehand it was hard-coded over here. And because we need to return something, we're also returning this, but this will never run. Now inside the interaction manager, we're also going to remove this destroy because we're going to destroy it inside this method. So we don't need it over here anymore, right? Because we're destroying it over here. So now let's change a few more things. If we go to our HUD manager, we find this part that we added in the beginning of the episode. So we don't want to use this grenades variable. So let's just use lethal count. And also inside the weapons manager, when we actually press on the button to throw the lethal, then instead of checking what is the amount of grenades, we want to check the lethals count. Another thing that we want to do before we test this out is change this equipped lethal type to none when we run out of lethals. Because if we had one grenade, this would become grenade, but then we threw the grenade and we have nothing inside our lethals, so this should go back to none. So over here inside this throw lethal method, after we decrease the lethal count, we're simply going to add, and this will make the equipped lethal type to be back to none when we don't have any more lethals. So now when all of this is done, we can go finally over here and remove this grenades variable. We can also create a few headers to just organize it a bit. So inside the inspector of the weapon manager, just make sure that this stands on none, because in the beginning of the game, there will be no equipped lethal type. And also click on the grenades that you have in the scene and just make sure that this is not none. So just select grenade and do this for the rest of your grenades. And of course, apply and save the prefab. So there is not much new, but things are more generic in the code, so everything should work the same way. And you can see that we have two lethals, so I cannot pick up this third one. So let's just throw this one. And now I can pick up this one. And you can see that the explosion that was here made this grenade move a bit because we had the radius pretty big. So this moved because of the explosion that happened over here. So let's take this final one and throw it. And you can also see that the grenade icon is gone because we have 0 grenades. The next thing we want to do is add tacticals into our game. So the same way we added these lethals, we're going to have tacticals that will be a different kind of throwables, and we're basically going to have lethals over here inside this slot and tacticals inside this slot. So you can always carry one type of lethals and one type of tacticals. Of course, this is just the way I'm creating this game. You can create it in different ways. So first, let's create an actual tactical prefab so we can use it and test this out. We are going to create a small grenade because it's pretty simple, and then you can just create any other kind of tacticals like gas grenades or flashbangs or stun grenades or things like that. So inside this package that we had, we don't get anything else. We only get this grenade. So you will have to find other models online. You can find 2 links in the description for a small grenade model. And of course, you can find your own. One of these links requires Blender. So you need to download the file into Blender and then just export it as an FBX. And the other link is for an actual FBX file, so you can use whatever you want. I already downloaded it and imported it, so I have this model over here. And maybe it's too big, so let's just make it a bit smaller. Let's say 4. Something like that. We're going to position it over here. And now we have this small grenade. We're going to rename it. And we're going to unpack it. And then we're going to create a new prefab out of it. So we're going to drag it into our prefabs folder. Next, we want to do the same things that we did with our grenade. We're going to add a collider. And it's very small, so let's just make it a bit bigger. And we also want to add a rigid body. And we're going to keep the mass at 1, but we're going to change the collision detection to continuous because we don't want it to pass through walls or something like that. Next, we also want to add the Throwables script. And we also want to add the outline. So we're going to disable the outline, and on the throwable, we are going to set the throwable type to be the smoke grenade, but we still don't have it, so we need to add it. And we're not going to change anything over here. Maybe we're going to reduce the delay to be about 2 or something like that. Let's just save all of this. And now inside the throwable, we are going to add another throwable type, smoke grenade. And now we can set this to be a smoke grenade. So now we need to start adding the tacticals into the throwable system. So first of all, we go over here, and over here we get the throwable effect. So instead of just having the grenade effect, we're going to add a smoke grenade effect. So we're going to add another case. So if it's a smoke grenade, then we're going to have a new method named smoke grenade, and we're going to generate it. Then we're going to copy most of this code, but we're going to do a few changes over here. So the code is pretty much the same like the one we had for the grenade. We simply get the smoke grenade effect. So this will be some kind of particle system that will just display some smoke, and we're going to store it inside the global references singleton. Then we're going to instantiate it. We're going to play the same sound for now. If you want to play some other sound for the different grenades, then you can simply add a different sound over here. And then we're going to get all the different colliders using this overlap sphere, and I explained about this in the previous episode, but instead of creating some kind of explosion force that will push the items, we are going to simply blind the enemies. Right now we don't have enemies, so this is not relevant, but in the future when we have enemies, we're going to simply reach into these enemies and we're going to blind them. But we definitely don't want to have some kind of explosion force because a smoke grenade doesn't create any kind of force. So this will be pretty simple, and for now the only thing that it will do is just have some kind of sound and a smoke effect. Now we can also generate this, and inside the global reference we can find it over here. So we need to drag some kind of effect into the inspector. Let's just make it public. So we're going to open our War Effects pack. Inside we're going to open the effects. We have this smoke folder, and I'm going to use this first one, this smoke grenade additive. So now I simply need to drag it into the global reference. And I also know that it's pretty small, so I'm just going to increase its size to be about 2.5. Now before we can actually throw it and see the effect, we need to also pick it up. So inside the weapon manager, we will scroll to the bottom over here, and we have this pickup throwable. So we're going to add another case. So if it's a smoke grenade, then simply run another method with the smoke grenade. But this time we're not going to run this pickup throwable as lethal, but we're going to pick up throwable as tactical. So this is a new method that we're going to create, and this is just to separate the different kinds. And before we add the code for this method, we're going to add a few things at the top. So the same way we had a count for the lethals, we also want to have a count for the tacticals. We also want to have a reference to the equipped tactical type, and we also want to have a prefab for the smoke grenade. Now at the start, we're also going to set it to be none. And now we can start adding the code for this pickup throwable as tactical. So the code will be very similar to the one we had over here for the lethals. So let's just copy all of this and paste it inside. So we simply change the kind. So instead of lethals, we have tacticals. So it's the same deal. So if we have the same kind of tactical that we're trying to pick up, or we have none, then we're going to try to pick up this tactical. And if we did not reach the limit, then we're going to add one. We're going to destroy the actual game object, and we're going to update the UI. And you can also have another limit for the tacticals. Maybe you want to carry 2 tacticals, but only 1 lethal. So you need to put this to be 2, and over here you can set it to be 1. So you can play around with this. Let's also make it better. And set it over here. Now we also want to do a few changes inside this update throwable UI. So over here, we're also going to have a switch statement dedicated for the tacticals. So instead equipped, we're going to have equipped tactical type. And over here, we're going to have our tacticals. So smoke grenade. And over here, we need to find a sprite for the smoke grenade. And then we also want to change the amount. So we're going to have a text for the tacticals amount. So when we call this update UI method, it will update all the different kinds, the lethals and the tacticals, and we don't need to specify exactly what we want to update. It will create a general update, and this is a better way to do it. Now we want to add the actual sprite for the smoke grenade. So we open our FPS icons pack, we go over here and let's look for something that looks like a smoke grenade, and then we're going to drag it back into our resources folder and we're going to rename it. Next, we will also open our HUD manager and add the option to hide the UI if we don't have any tacticals, the same way that we did for the lethals. So over here we add the same code, but instead of lethals we have tacticals. Now, another thing that we also need to change in order for the tacticals to work is inside the weapon manager. Over here, when we actually try to throw this tactical, we need to copy all of this. And instead of G, we need to set it to be T, because this is the key that we set. And instead of lethals, we say tacticals count. And over here, of course, we need to change it to throw tactical. And over here, we also want to apply some kind of force multiplier. So we're going to add another condition. So if we press on the G key or on the T key. So it doesn't matter on which one we press, it will start increasing the multiplier. And then when we release one of them, it's going to use this multiplier. So now let's generate this method as well. Let's take it down into the region for the throwables. And again, it's going to be very similar to this code. So we're simply going to copy all of this and we're going to paste it inside. And we're going to change a few things. So these are just some minor changes. We are going to change the name to be tactical prefab, and we're going to change these counters to be tactical count and equip tactical type. Now we need to get the throwable prefab, but there is a problem because right now we're using the equipped lethal type and it will not know if we're trying to get the prefab for the lethal or the tactical. So we need to actually pass inside a parameter. So we're going to pass it over here. So inside the throw tactical, we're going to pass in equipped tactical type. And inside the throw lethal, we're going to pass in the equipped lethal type. So now we need to update this method, add parameter, and it's going to add this parameter over here. But we're going to rename it to just be throwable. And we're going to use this inside the switch statement. So now it doesn't matter if it's a lethal or it's a tactical, it will simply give us the prefab. So we need to add another prefab for the smoke grenade. Now let's go over here to the weapon manager and let's drag the smoke grenade prefab. So we have it inside our prefabs folder. So let's drag it inside. And right now we can also change the max lethals and max tacticals because we created these variables, but we're going to keep it at 2 for each. So now we can pick up this grenade and we can see at the bottom that it goes up. We cannot pick up the third one, but we can also pick up this smoke and we can see it over there. If I hold the G key and I throw, it works. And now we can also throw the smoke. So I'm pressing and holding the T key. And we can see this smoke effect. So everything is working. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you about the throwables. At the moment, if we try to pick up another kind of lethal and we already carry a grenade, it will simply not allow us to pick up something else. So it really depends on what you want to do in your game. Some games allow us to swap between the different throwables. Other games will make you drop the previous items so you can pick up others. Or maybe other games have an inventory that you can have multiple throwables. So I can't show you all of these different options. You simply need to decide what you want to do in your game and figure out how to implement this. If many of you will ask me to show you how to do something specific, then I will do it in a future episode. But right now we are done with the throwables. Maybe I'm going to add a few other throwables, but it will only be when we actually have enemies and we want to test them out. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave a like. It will help me a lot, and I'll see you next time.